Happy Halloween and welcome to Access Vikings. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues, Ben Goessling and Andrew Krammer. We're out here at TCO Performance Center. We just got done watching practice. We'll go and talk to KOC and players for the final time ahead of their trip to Detroit to face the Lions on Sunday afternoon. And after we recorded our Wednesday episode, we heard from J.J. McCarthy, who is set to start on Sunday, making his return from his high ankle sprain. Ben, did anything really stand out to you from McCarthy's comments just about how he's feeling or where his head's at entering his return to the starting lineup?
Well, I mean, the fact that he said last week his ankle still felt like it was stuck in cement.
Yeah.
And then this week he said, it feels amazing, I'm 100% ready to go. You know, that turn is significant, I think. If you're talking about in a week of there was still enough concern last week to say, no, he's still going to be the emergency third quarterback. They put him through that workout, and they didn't feel like he's ready to come back yet. And now they're saying all systems go. I mean, that timing, I think, is worth keeping in mind just in case there are any issues on Sunday. But, I think that extra time that he had to rest and recover, he's saying he felt like that made a big difference. He's probably still going to have some lingering effects of this. I mean, you have scar tissue with injuries like this that are going to come, that's going to be there, and you may not feel 100% all the time. But I think overall, for him to get through the full week, he was full on Wednesday, full on Thursday, presumably will be full on Friday as we record this in terms of practice participation. That's what they wanted to see the whole time. And they've got it, and now he gets the chance to go out there as they try to end their longest losing streak to the Lions since the first 5 games they faced them in franchise history.
Wow.
The streak ended 2 days after the Kennedy assassination when Pete Rozelle decided to famously play those games on Sunday 2 days after the shooting in Dallas. So that is how long we are talking about here, is way back to the days of JFK.
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy was definitely not born then.
He was not.
No.
Neither were any of the three of us.
I was
Certainly
going to
not
say,
Emily.
not me, but also
Emily,
not
John
you
F.
guys.
Kennedy was the president, elected in 1960.
I've seen the Zapruder film.
1960.
Yeah, J.J. McCarthy, I thought one thing that stood out to me is, and he's said this before, but he said it again, was just like, there is going to continue to be discomfort as he plays through this. Like, it's not just going to feel like it did before the injury at the beginning of the season, but it's that difference between discomfort and pain where I think you can play through discomfort.
Yeah.
You don't want to play through pain. And so that I think will be interesting to see how he manages that, and if it indeed does not limit his mobility, which is obviously something they've talked about a lot. Andrew, what have we heard from some of his teammates talking about just his return? I know TJ Hockenson talked about it a little bit, some of the other guys that are leaders in this offense.
Yeah, we've heard Justin Jefferson talk about just JJ's confidence, and not just this week, but in the past, about him trying to get it up and trying to make him feel like he's part of the group again and part of the first team offense, that huddle that he didn't rejoin until really last week. It would have been, I suppose, or maybe it was the week before that, but they really haven't had many opportunities with him. And so I think getting those reps in, making him feel comfortable on that ankle, getting the rapport back with Jefferson that he hasn't thrown a whole lot to, going back to even in the summer, and then obviously with Jordan Addison, is going to be massive. But Emily, you bring up the mobility with him. To me, that's the biggest point with this, because it's Aiden Hutchinson, it's Alan McNeil, it's a lot of really good pass rushers up front for Detroit. And O'Connell mentioned this week, like, McCarthy needs to use that mobility as a weapon for him, especially as the arm and the processing of that is all just kind of developing as it goes.
Well, I thought it was interesting when O'Connell talked on Wednesday, too, that he said there's been a lot of discussions between himself and J.J. McCarthy about the right ways to use the mobility. Because if you think about it, that injury against Atlanta was on a play the Vikings thought of, or did turn into the league, and the league didn't find anything to find the player for it. I think it was Caden Ellis that brought him down for a hip drop tackle, but that play was on a scramble. And then I believe some of the plays against the Raiders a year ago that led to the torn meniscus, where he was making a lot of plays out of the pocket. So there is a component of this that he has to do, especially if the offensive line struggles, where he has to protect himself. But applying that mobility in a way that you still don't take hits when it's unnecessary, you get down, get out of bounds, rather than trying to turn back for an extra yard or two. I mean, a lot of this becomes, they need to see consistency from him, but he also has to be durable enough to stay on the field. He's missed enough time that you aren't going to develop any type of rhythm and consistency if he's not available. So that is a big part of this too. I thought it was interesting that O'Connell brought that up, of how to use mobility in a way that helps you get away from hits, not put yourself in the way of additional unnecessary hits.
Certainly will be interesting to see J.J. McCarthy back on the field Sunday. Max Brosmer will continue being the number 2, and then John Wolford, who's on the practice squad now, will be the number 3. We heard from Wes Phillips yesterday that John is a, quote, psycho due to some practice habits that he had in a very small backyard, which I'm going to bring us back around to that. So I'm not mentioning that for no reason, but I'm bringing us back around to that later. Ben, you mentioned the O-line in there. We're recording this before game statuses come out, but I think it's worth mentioning that Christian Darrisaw was full on Wednesday. He was marked as a non-participant yesterday.
Yep.
It was not listed as a rest day, though we will say that that is typically the day he has taken rest throughout the week. We did see him out there at practice today. Brian O'Neill has been limited the past 2 days. I would expect him to be limited again today just based on what we saw up there. But I guess for each of those guys, like, what do we think the chances are? And at this point, like, how big of a difference does it make for this O-line if you have either or both of them, considering they still feel like they're at least a level of hurt?
Well, O'Neill, to me, I mean, they're both a big deal, but O'Neill in some ways is the bigger one because there's more of a question, and he's going to be the guy that sees more of Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson lines up on the right side, or on the across from the right side of the Vikings offensive line, on the left side of the Lions defensive line, meaning the right tackle is going to be the one that gets the primary supply of matchups against Aiden Hutchinson, which is the toughest thing that anybody's going to have to face on Sunday. I think he has 13 and a half sacks in his last 12 regular season games, including, I think, 5 this year. So, I mean, this is a guy who was on a short list for Defensive Player of the Year consideration last year when he sustains that nasty broken leg injury that we remember. I think they were playing Dallas when that happened. So Brian O'Neill being back and being healthy enough to handle Aiden Hutchinson, I think is a big part of this. Certainly Christian Darrisaw and what he's able to do if he's able to play the full game kind of as they're back in a little more of a normal routine is a big deal too. But I think O'Neill's status, both because it's kind of up in the air and because of the matchup he'll face, is a big deal in this one.
Yeah, O'Neill was pretty confident when I talked to him earlier in the week about his chances of playing, but things can change certainly as practice reps get taken and as inflammation goes up and down. And as you mentioned, it's 2 injuries now with each knee that he's got dealing with. Christian Darrisaw is somebody that I think, well, I should mention too with O'Neill, I forgot that I'd asked him about just big picture. What are you thinking about how this offense is at, or where this offense is at, 3 and 4, J.J. McCarthy coming back, and he said, speaking of Aiden Hutchinson, he goes, the big picture is not going to help me block Aiden. So that's been obviously taking up his entire mind. He's not looking past the pictures of Aiden Hutchinson on his iPad or Microsoft tablet.
Microsoft Surface tablet. Not that we are sponsored by either Apple or neither. We are sponsored by neither Apple nor Microsoft.
Just striving
for the sake of accuracy.
Yeah, striving for accuracy. So it's huge though, because we talk about McCarthy, his mobility, his ankle. I mean, that's the health that matters the most. Obviously, you want everybody healthy, but if they can keep the quarterback upright, keep him developing, they need those 2 bookends. Like, that makes everything go, and they're probably not going to have Josh Oliver, C.J. Ham. They're probably not going to have him as well. Establishing the run in this setting, in that building, against this defensive front is going to be incredibly difficult. And as we said 2 days ago, it's a tough test.
Yeah, it's a really tough test, you guys. Is this the game that we think Andrew Van Ginkel finally makes his return? He is another one that you guys heard from in the locker room. I wasn't in there, but talked to him Wednesday, and he kind of declined to go into any more specifics on the neck injury, what's going on there, but did say it was his goal to play Sunday, that he's been feeling good. He's been a full participant the first 2 days of the week. Do we think this is it, and how much of a difference is that going to make for this Vikings defense?
I mean, it seemed like we're heading that way. If he's a full participant the first 2 days of the week, it seems like we're heading towards him returning. I think that makes a big difference. I think they are a lot more deceptive. I think they are a lot more versatile with him on the field just because you can put him in so many different spots, and he's such an intuitive player that he knows where to be. He knows kind of those spots to get to, especially if he's dropping into coverage. He knows where the throwing lanes are going to be. We saw it. Well, we've seen it a number of times, whether it's pouncing on a screen pass or, kind of throwing where Aaron Rodgers' hot throw is going to be last year in London and stepping in front of that and running it back for a touchdown. So I think he makes an awfully big difference. I think, didn't he have one in the Week 18 game last year that he almost picked off? I think he almost jumped the screen in that one, too. I feel like there was one that he had a near interception.
I can't remember. Yeah, I actually can't remember, but maybe. I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, I feel like he did. But regardless, I think changes a lot of things for them defensively. So I think it's a big deal if, in fact, he is back on Sunday.
Yeah, I was talking to Harrison Smith in the locker room earlier this week for a story just on what is going wrong with this defense, and we got to talking about Van Ginkel, and he says, look, I know he's just one guy, but he's really a multiplier in terms of, like you mentioned, you put him on the field, he lines other people up correctly, he gets people into the right calls, he makes adjustments on the defensive line with their twists and stunts that help them out immensely. And Harrison said that for a guy who's up on the line of scrimmage, he sees so much from a spot that you typically cannot see a whole lot from. Guys typically can play, as Harrison was saying, with a very narrow vision. And he's just somebody that opens up, they feel like, their defense, not just the playbook, but again, what other guys can do around him. And so I don't think can or have even tried to overstate his impact. They just really feel like if he comes back, it's going to be as huge as you're talking about.
Well, and a couple of weeks ago, Jonathan Grenard, he was talking about Dallas Turner, but he was saying like how much of what Dallas has had to do this year is because Andrew Van Ginkel's role is so large, and he plays like 4 different roles in this defense and moves all over the field. And so he is a veteran. He's a lot more accustomed to that. And Jonathan was shouting out Dallas for taking on that role. But like there is a difference there. And I think you'll see that once you get the veteran back on the field versus the second year guy. I think that's all injury stuff that we have at this moment to talk about. To wrap the loop on Van Ginkel, I'll be curious if they go with like a snap count, like situation where they limit his reps, or if they do like the Christian Darrisaw approach and say, Andrew, you tell us when you want to come out of the game.
And that matters a lot because if he goes to the Cincinnati plan where it was only 1 week off,
right,
and that Chicago game he had landed on his neck, got the concussion and all that, but it was just third downs. It was just pass rushes. It wasn't the running downs that they really seem to have missed him on too, in terms of stopping the early down rushes that have worked so well against the Vikings. And if Detroit gets rolling with their run game, I'm not sure how they're going to win this one.
Well, and the Lions are a team that like to run the ball. They, I think, are second in the league in rushing attempts. Some of that's they're ahead, and they're trying to ice games that way. But this is a team that will go for it a lot on fourth downs, as we've seen, and they'll run it a lot on fourth downs. I mean, whether it's Gibbs or David Montgomery, they have a couple of ways to attack you. That line is probably not quite what it was with Frank Ragnow. I think they're getting a little bit healthier up there. I think Taylor Decker, sounds like Dan Campbell said he's going to play. But this is a tough team to stop in the running game, and they have a habit of wearing you down with what they do on the run, just because they do it effectively and they're not afraid to keep drives going on fourth down, which means that wear and tear on your defense, I do think that changes. I mean, we've talked about this. How much does a running game have a cumulative effect? I think when you're not able to get off the field on third down because they go for it, I do think that takes more of a toll. I mean, how do we quantify that? That's the big question if we're having this discussion. But I just think when you're saying, okay, we've got to stop them 4 times, not 3, and then if you don't stop them, it prolongs the time that you're on the field so much more. I have to think that adds up and wears out a defense, and they certainly have. I think the Lions have a pretty strong belief that works because they keep going back to it, and they've had a lot of success doing it.
Let's get into some listener questions from Tom C. on X. If J.J. McCarthy is re-injured Sunday, is KOC finally comfortable playing Max Brosmer? Can't imagine the new QB being ready yet to step in. And how mobile will J.J. be off that high ankle sprain?
Who wrote that?
Tom C.
Tom, let him play first. If he's hurt again, what are you talking about here? Vikings fans already being like, guy, calm down.
But I think the other part is they simply would have to be comfortable playing Max because he is the number 2. They could not jump him to go to John Wolford because he is the emergency third. Both guys would need to be injured, which of course the Vikings would not want to happen. There's just not a situation, but not a very likely situation where we would be seeing John Wolford on Sunday. I guess not impossible. But
no, not impossible, but Max Brosmer will be the number 2, which means both J.J. McCarthy and Max Brosmer would have to get hurt for John Wolford to play. And I think now, I mean, we'll know this by tomorrow because I think they have to have John Wolford on the active roster. I don't think you can bring the practice squad quarterback up. I mean, I think this was a discussion at the owners' meetings last year.
I believe you can elevate him like a standard player, but there are no unlimited elevations like there used to be.
Yeah.
I think there was like that 1-year period, or maybe they just had introduced a rule to do unlimited elevations, and then the PA said, no, you need to make the guy a 53 player.
Right, because they want the player to get paid better. They don't want it to be a use of essentially a free roster spot at a practice squad salary. But yes, to wrap this up, Max Brosmer will be the number 2 quarterback on Sunday. There will be, if J.J. McCarthy does get hurt, not that the Vikings are rooting for that, certainly not that fans are rooting for that.
Come on,
But yes, the Max Brosmer will be the number 2. So he will get his chance to play if, in fact, there is an injury that forces that to happen.
The second part of that question about how mobile JJ will be, we talked about a little bit. I think it really comes down to like I would expect him only to be rushing if it's like a scramble. Like I don't think they're going to dial up a bunch of run plays for him and really test that ankle, though. Like
go to the zone read stuff, and they did it against the Bears.
You'd think not, but I'm sure maybe they've got it in the back pocket, right? It's a gotta-have-it play, end of the game. But I would be shocked if the opening drive, they're just running him into a bunch of traffic.
Especially when you have Aaron Jones back, too, and he has a game back under his belt now in his return from the hamstring injury. So you're working with both Jones and Jordan Mason, and then also Xavier Scott, who they obviously used a bunch while Aaron Jones was out. So they've got other options to run around. I think they will probably try and limit how much JJ is moving, you would think. Let's see. Okay, this one came via email from JS. Harrison Smith's overall presence on the field has waned in the past few years. Is it scheme, his inevitable physical decline, or something else?
I mean, this game, everybody gets to a point where you are not quite what you were. And I think, Harrison Smith is 36 years old, still playing this position. You don't see a lot of guys do that. I do think there's a little bit of a noticeable difference with him in terms of speed, his ability to get to places. That's going to happen to just about anybody. Some of it is probably scheme, and some of it was he had that absence at the beginning of the season with the medical issues. So that plays a little bit of a role into it. We've seen him more in recent weeks. I think we've seen him on the field quite a bit more. But, yeah, I think you see it. There's going to be a difference, and that's going to happen to just about anybody. That's just normal, facts of human aging. I think that's going to be part of it.
And I do think Flores mentioned, too, when he was out with the personal health issue for so long in training camp, Flores had mentioned that it wasn't a small thing that he was gone. We were running a defense without him with Theo Jackson in there. At the time, he liked how Theo and Josh had played when Harrison came back. So those first 2 games with Harrison back, he wasn't playing a full-time role. It was third downs. He was that third safety. But it's stark to go back and see, like Josh Metellus was telling me something about how they're seeing certain runs that Arthur Smith had called against them, as he called it, in the Pasternaut days, way back in 2023. So I went back and watched that game recently, and it was stark at how different Harrison's role was even just 2 years ago, or I suppose even last year, where he's on the line of scrimmage, he's blitzing, he's involved in the box. He's very doing the physical stuff that gets you banged up and hurt often. And it seems like it's only October, but it seems like they've scaled him back quite a bit where he's not doing as much of that stuff.
Yeah, it's been Metellus more up in those roles if they need it. And, Metellus in some cases basically been playing inside linebacker.
Yeah, I know there was at least one play at the Chargers last Thursday night where I think you and I turned to each other and Harrison just couldn't bring someone down. It was probably Monty Vidal or one of their wide receivers. I don't remember. And we were like, yeah, that's going to happen. I think, too, like when you know a guy like that, like he's coming up on his last season, whether it's this one, whether he decided to push it another year, like whatever it may be, you have to anticipate the changing of the guard there and maybe start giving one of those other guys more reps so that when they do have to fully take over the role, like Theo Jackson, like they have at least more experience and you're not just being like, hey, Harrison's gone now, like we got to put you in, like get ready to start.
It's a good point because as it's similar to what we talk about with Andrew Van Ginkel, there are a lot of 400 level classes in this defense where experience matters, whether it's Harrison Smith, whether it's Andrew Van Ginkel, making checks, getting people aligned, maybe seeing things that other people don't see, you have to get somebody else ready to do that because if you rely on those things to the degree that they do and you don't have those players in the future, your defense necessarily has to shift. Are you going to have somebody with the experience and the level of skill and the level of intuition that Harrison Smith has? Probably not. That's a hard thing to replace. I think to say that you're going to have a 6-time Pro Bowler who's been here for 14 years and, you can just snap your fingers and have somebody that does what he does, that's not the case. That's a disrespect to the career that he's had and just the uniqueness of the role that he plays. But you do have to start to figure out ways to approximate some of those things so it's not just this massive drop-off at whatever point he is done playing. Maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year. We'll have to see how that goes. But yes, I think the point about figuring out how to keep the knowledge transfer going so that you're not having to adjust everything you do with the absence of that player is important.
Let's get one more from JS in here. TJ Hockenson one feels fitting for Lions Week. After coming to the Vikings in 2022, TJ Hockenson seemed destined for top 5 tight end stats for several years. The expectations have apparently fallen so much that I'm wondering if we'll ever see that player. Well, we see TJ Hockenson a lot, so I don't know about the second half of this question. I'll rephrase it as, do we think TJ Hockenson has performed to what fans would have thought he would a few years ago?
I think he's saying, will we see the 2022 version of TJ Hockenson again?
Yes. Yeah. Do you think so?
I don't know.
Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I don't know, because ever since the ACL, MCL, Kirby Joseph.
Yep.
Ever since
Christmas Eve 23.
Ever since Kirby Joseph happened, he just hasn't been the same player. At least wasn't the second half of last year. And this year, this offense has not had the volume passing wise to really produce for much of anybody outside of Justin Jefferson consistently. And you're seeing Jordan Addison get some run now too. And Hockenson has been relegated to such a blocking role too, not just in the run game, but in the pass game, where their tackle issues, their blocking issues up front have kind of made him such. I also think that I don't think we're seeing the same comfort. He doesn't seem to have the same kind of comfort in between the numbers, catching balls over the middle, in traffic, getting hit, all those things that we're used to seeing from him. I go back to the 2023 game with him, or was it the Saints, where he had like 12 catches in the first half, was setting records.
The Dobbs game. The Dobbs' one win as a starter.
That's right. It was right after the Falcons game. And so Hockenson went wild because Jefferson was out. He was playing Jefferson's role. They were splitting him out, making him the feature receiver. Not only do we not see coaches scheming things like that for him, I don't know if he's still capable of that, and maybe they know that, and that's why he's not doing it.
Well, and the other thing is, when he came in here in that trade in 22, almost 3 years ago to the day, essentially, I mean, that may have been Halloween that they made the trade. It was it was a trade deadline deal, so we're coming up on that next week. But he basically became wide receiver 2 on that team. I mean, it was Justin Jefferson and then TJ Hockenson. The number of targets he got when he came in here, like the last 9 games of that season, he ended up catching, I think, 60-some passes from Kirk Cousins, even after that midseason trade. Jordan Addison was not here yet. So that changes things as well. Jordan Addison's emergence, you have both Addison and Jefferson now, which 23, you didn't have Jefferson for part of the year. And 24, obviously, Hockenson's coming back from the ACL. So I think things change in terms of roles and what people are expected to do in this offense. McCarthy certainly found Hockenson plenty in training camp, but the guy that he had the best rapport with seems like Jordan Addison. So now that they have all of these pieces actually on the field at the same time, and it's not these sort of ships passing in the night that we've seen throughout the course of this year, it will be interesting to see what the workloads look like. But I think that's part of it too, where you have Addison having asserted himself in this offense in a way that he had not, certainly in 22 because he wasn't here. And then in 23, 24, just you have so many people coming and going that you don't really have this type of a comparison to make.
It is a lot of mouths to feed for a passing offense that is just not producing the amount of plays, as Kevin O'Connell likes to talk about, the amount of reps and the high play count he likes to reach. They just haven't done that very often.
Yeah, and they're just not going to throw it to the degree that they did with Kirk Cousins in 22 and with a running game that they didn't really trust enough. I think they are trying to run the ball more. They're not going to put as much of it on a quarterback as they did back then. So that's going to change some things too.
TJ Hawkinson's stat line, 27 receptions, 222 yards, 1 TD. He is right now second in receptions behind Justin Jefferson, but obviously that's couched by the fact that Jordan Addison missed 3 games. And I think Jordan Addison, who has 21 receptions, is probably likely to pass TJ here in the next week
Yards
or
per
two.
catch are notable there too.
Yeah, yards per catch is 8.2 for Hockenson. All 3 of the receivers, Jefferson, Addison, and Naylor, are above 10, close to 15 for Jefferson and Addison. Let's hit one more question real fast. Ben, I know you answered this in the Access Vikings newsletter, so you just want to give us a little teaser and people can find more there. But from Skull Fan on X, any contract stuff under the covers with Hargrave or Allen that makes an easy out after this year? Something like vested guarantees, looking at cap websites, it seems like they both have at least half their contracts guaranteed next year.
Yeah, Javon Hargrave is the bigger one. Javon Hargrave, I think, there's the signing bonus, and then I think that's there's $4 million of his base salary is guaranteed for next year. And his base salary, I believe, is like $14 million something. The exact details are in the Access Vikings newsletter this week. Answered this in a little more detail there. But Hargrave, they would save something like $10+ million if they were to release him next year. Jonathan Allen has, I think, 13-something million left of his signing bonus, plus there's a vesting guarantee on like the third day of the league year. He has, I think, like $8 million of it guaranteed right now, and then the next $8 million becomes guaranteed next year. So you could save that, but you're still going to have the guaranteed money that's in there now, plus the signing bonus. So he's got like a $21 million cap number, but there'd be, I think, $17 million or something like that of dead money going into next year if you cut him. So they could save some money, but then you're also devoting $17+ million to a guy that's not on your roster. So they're going to have to make some of these types of moves. I think Hargrave makes more sense. I do wonder this week, though, if they were to lose this game and they're 3-5, the trade deadline's on Tuesday, does that tip them in a direction that you say, okay, if we're going to get rid of one of these guys anyway, maybe we get something back, and then you push some of that money out the door, before you're paying all of it, and you could save a lot of it by making those moves. I don't know that they're going to do that, but it just makes you wonder a little bit. I think they're going to probably have their plan and stick to it regardless of what happens Sunday. But, if they're on the fence at all, if you lose and you're basically 3 behind the Lions, 3.5 behind the Packers in the division, I don't know. It's just one of those things that I thought of this week, and it's worth kind of seeing what happens over the next few days here.
And if they could get something for Hargrave, that would maybe seem to be the one, just considering how coaches have scaled his role down.
Yes.
He didn't even start. Levi Drake Rodriguez started in L.A., and I think it was just like 30-40% of the snaps.
Jalen Redmond's playing a lot, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other piece of it.
Yeah.
So, I do wonder about that one. I think that'd be one to watch.
Because if they cut Hargrave, I think it'd be a 1-year, $19 million deal for him.
Yep.
Which, oof.
Yeah. And so if you traded him, you get the prorated portion of the base salary back for this year, too. So, I mean, that would save a little bit of money, and they are going to be in a situation where however much they can roll over into next year will be helpful for them.
We are going to close with a few minutes of Vikings Flashback Fridays. So we had said that it was the Colts game. You guys actually did not put the Colts game on my list. I still watched the comeback just so that we could talk about it a little bit. But then I also watched the actual next game on my list because it was the 2022 Week 14 Lions game.
Yeah.
So felt topical to watch the Lions, the week of the Lions. Let's start with the Colts game just briefly, though. Comeback was insane, and I understand why Kevin O'Connell says things like, we have a different line of believing in ourselves than maybe everyone else does. And I think it would be a lovely retrospective to talk to people who left that game early, like US Bank Stadium, and left at like the top of the fourth quarter, and then we're
Harrison Smith, I remember, noticed
on
that
the doors.
too. Like, I remember talking to him afterwards. He's like, yeah, we saw it. We saw people that were leaving.
Yeah.
One Vikings player I remember mentioning that they had a relative who swore that they bet on them at halftime, that the odds, in-game odds, were so obviously insane because they were down 33-0. That now who knows? Like, that's just relatives say
Basically
things,
like
right?
a lottery ticket. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
relative
it hit.
Yeah, and people say things, so who knows if this person actually did it. But I remember one Viking player being like, a buddy of mine or a relative of mine made a ton of money on us.
It's like the 500,000 Packer fans that were at the Ice Bowl.
Yeah. As I said to you guys before we started recording, seeing Matt Ryan pop up in the Colts jersey, I totally forgot that happened, and I was like, Matt Ryan is the QB in this famed game that we've been talking about on the beat.
The wildest part of that game to me is that comeback could have been even easier because they had, I think, 2 fumble recoveries.
They had one late,
Yeah, they got called back. I'm trying to remember who was the corner. Chandon Sullivan, I think, had both of those. They ran 2 back for touchdowns, and they blew, I think, the fumble dead. I mean, they had 2 touchdowns that they did not get. So you scored 33 even without that. It's like, and it didn't start until later in that third quarter that they even got anything going. So, yeah, it probably could have been even easier for them to do than it was. Not that it was easy, but, the fact that happened without the help of those touchdowns is kind of wild.
My favorite part was the C.J. Ham coin toss overtime.
Yep.
The memed face where he gets caught on the broadcast just smirking at the Colts people. And I can't remember who was up there for the Colts, but the Colts were looking dejected. Like
Paris Campbell or something.
How are we up here? In overtime, we were just up 33-0, and C.J.'s just looking at him, giving him the side eye, like, "Yep, we're here, buddy.
This is happening."
Well, and it would be really easy right now to do a retrospective on this because who do we have in the Vikings locker room now to talk to?
We did last year.
You did,
Yep.
but you didn't have Ryan Kelly.
Right.
You didn't have Will Fries in the locker room. Isaiah Rodgers was also on this Colts team at the time, and so
Carson Wentz was gone by that point, right?
Yes, it was Matt Ryan and Nick Foles apparently in the quarterback.
Boy, oh boy. Well, Nick Foles, I suppose, with Frank Reich.
I requested Matt Ryan for the oral history last year on this, and he declined.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you request Jeff Saturday?
I did. He declined. Because they both work in media. Yeah.
Yes. Like Jeff Saturday came from ESPN. Matt Ryan was on his way to CBS. So if you're going either to a TV desk or coming from one, it's generally not a great endorsement of your ability to be at your prime in your NFL career or coaching career. So.
Yeah, so that was a good one. I only watched from about midway through. I started when the comeback started because I was like, I don't need to watch them get down 33 points. I was like, I think I can skip this, especially because it wasn't actually on my list.
Started early too. I think there was a Cousins. Did he get tripped by Ed Ingram in that game? I feel like there was something goofy that happened early that led to a Colts touchdown.
Yeah, I can't even remember because all the things that are imprinted in my mind are the second half of how they came back.
In the last 15 minutes.
Jalen Reagor stopping on the pick.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back and watch quarterback, this game obviously got a lot of attention. And some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on the sidelines, I think, because I think Jalen Reagor stopped on a route that Cousins thought he was going to keep moving, and Cousins on the sidelines is like, he just stopped. Just keep moving. And I think O'Connell goes over to him at one point and basically says, there's nothing you can do about that. Don't get frustrated. And Cousins goes, oh, I'm getting frustrated. Like, he was basically just trying to say, I need you to stay with me. Don't go to, the dark place. I need you to stay engaged in this. If we're going to pull this off, don't check out, essentially, was the messaging on the sideline, I think.
Yeah. So then I went and watched the full Lions game from the week previous.
Hat and T-shirt game.
Hat and T-shirt game.
They did get they won the NFC.
Yep.
Or no, they won the NFC North in the Colts game.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, no, they didn't do it against the Lions. One of my big takeaways from watching this Lions game, or just at least something I was thinking about, is we haven't discussed this much, but this team this year basically hasn't had C.J. Ham at all.
Yep.
He was available for one game. He was available for the Eagles game, and then now has had another injury. And obviously, he's another player that's on the older side and is already not doing the same things that he was in 2022. But I do wonder how much
memeable faces and coin tosses in overtime.
I do wonder how much of a difference he could be just being around an extra kind of force, veteran presence, from a leadership side, but also just from physicality side in that backfield. And I think missing both him and Aaron Jones for that middle chunk of the first part of the year, probably did more than we've talked about.
Pass protection too. I think that's the other big piece of it.
As Jordan Mason misses Derwin James on a key third down to open the Chargers game, it's that could have been C.J. Ham there in that fullback spot because it was. They put Mason in the fullback spot with Jefferson at the dot at running back. But I think Ham has been a critical one that we just haven't talked about because of how many other guys have been out.
Right.
The triage and list of names.
I mentioned John Wolford's small backyard earlier and said I was going to bring it back around because I'm listening. I kind of multitask when I do these. I have it on and I'll try to extra pay attention when the Vikings have the ball and then do other stuff. And I'm listening and they're all of a sudden talking about Dalvin Cook practicing in his grandma's backyard. And they're his grandma had a really small backyard. And I was like, how funny that this commentary about someone having a small backyard that they practiced in at some point has come up twice this week for me.
That's where NFL careers are made. If you got a small backyard, kids.
Jerry Rice used to chase rabbits, didn't he? Was it Jerry Rice or Walter Payton?
I didn't know that.
I think it's one of the two of them. I think maybe it was Walter Payton. They used to chase rabbits. They said that's how they learned to be so shifty.
Interesting. Oh, wow. So that was just one of those things where I was like, oh, interesting. This is aligning weirdly well that we're talking about this.
Brings the John Wolford thing full circle.
Yeah, John Wolford full circle. Couple just kind of sillier things I wrote off. TJ Hockenson in-season trade, kind of wild. Just thinking about a guy of that caliber getting traded to a division rival mid-season.
It was the second big trade they had made with that organization that year. That was, of course, the year that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Brad Holmes make the trade in the draft, where the Vikings go back from number 12 to number 32. Vikings, of course, take Lewis Seen. Lions take Jamison Williams, who we will see on Sunday. But that sort of did create this relationship where the two said, yeah, we can think about doing things like this, and probably leads to the Hockenson trade as a result.
Wasn't TJ traded like right before the Lions kind of started to take off?
Yeah.
They were basically still awful right before he left, and I think they picked it up right at the end of the 2022 season.
Yeah, because they got hot, and then they knocked the Packers out of the playoffs. I think that Week 18 Sunday night game. I think the Lions, in some tiebreaker scenario, had, if it had fallen their way, they had a chance to get in. They were eliminated and basically were playing spoilers, and they sent Aaron Rodgers home in what turned out to be his last game in Green Bay, I believe. So, yes, they got hot and then have kind of stayed hot ever since.
If I could successfully fake punt, I'd do it often. The Lions did fake punt in this game, so I'd like to see more of it. I think it makes the game fun.
But now that we've seen a K-ball up close, I don't
Right,
know how
that's
you
true.
would
We didn't
ever
even
fake
talk
one of
about the
those because
K-balls.
It's basically like a beach ball. This thing is insane. Like in
Matt
terms of
Daniels
just
show and tell this
Yeah.
week?
Just
it
how
was fun.
I don't know how anyone keeps a grip on it.
I didn't touch it. I just looked because everyone else was passing it around. But it was interesting. And then the final thing, and this brings us back and connects
A button bar for you.
this past game to this weekend, is that Brian Flores made a comment yesterday about how, like, part of why this Lions team is so successful and how they've continued to have success through this coordinator change is that they have these core groups of players that have really been around for so long. And I was just thinking, like, how different it is for a team to have the same quarterback, Jared Goff, at the helm for 3-4 seasons versus having a different guy every year. Like, and there's, like, more than just Jared Goff on that Lions team that's been around. But, like, that is what the Vikings are hoping to get to with J.J. McCarthy, is having the same guy. And, like, it is hard to wait that out. Like, they're 5-7 in this game that when they come to play the Vikings. And it's like, now look at them 3 seasons later. Yeah. Like, it just makes a difference to have consistency at quarterback and then just across the board.
Yeah, and to have Goff.
Institutional knowledge, continuity, all that stuff.
To have Goff take off the way he has been just that piece that I don't think anybody, including Detroit and Brad Holmes, could have expected.
No, he was kind of a throw-in, not a throw-in, but the contract, the Lions needed to take on the contract to make the Matthew Stafford trade work. And, of course, Matthew Stafford goes and wins a Super Bowl with the Rams, and that leads in part to young Rams offensive coordinator Kevin O'Connell becoming a hot head coaching candidate who ends up in Minnesota, hires Brian Flores, whose defense had completely thrown Jared Goff off in the 2020 game in Miami between the Dolphins and the Rams. So there's a lot of butterfly effect stuff. We've talked about this over the years. This is not anything new, but Goff has a long history of struggles against Flores that recently he has changed around with the help of Ben Johnson. But you certainly saw last year, okay, he started to crack this code against Flores and has really been better against pressure in general, I think, than he was earlier in his career. He struggled with it a little bit this year, but I think overall he's found answers for those things and really has thrived in the center of what they're doing.
I was shocked to see, and I know that it just seems like the Lions always light up the scoreboard every time they face the Vikings recently, but they've averaged 32 points and have scored over 30 in each of the 5 straight wins against the Vikings.
Well, I think the other thing with that game, I think Justin Jefferson set the regular season franchise record for receiving yards and did it while being grabbed a lot, as the Lions are wont to do when they play Justin Jefferson especially.
The Vikings and the Lions face off Sunday at noon Central Time at Ford Field. Ben and Andrew are going to be there. They will have your post-game podcast for you from Ford Field. That's all we have for this Friday episode. Thank you for your questions, and we hope you enjoyed talking about that Colts comeback and previewing a Lions team that looks much the same as it did a couple years back.